Good afternoon, everyone. Happy 2016. Happy New Year to everybody, as this is the first meeting of the year for the Ways and Means Committee. I'm John Quincy, the chair, and I'm joined by Councilmember Johnson, Council Vice President Glidden, Council Members Palmisano, Yang, and I think Councilmember Bender will be here in just a moment. There she is. So we're obviously the full committee and can begin our work for the year. There are 33 items on the printed agenda. 32 of those items will be on consent. Then we have the first of the item on the agenda is the public hearing, and this is a public hearing on the Ethics Code ordinance. And I think we'll take that up first because there's another item that I'd like to walk on with the committee's indulgence from an item from the city attorney's office. So we'll take that item up after we get to the public hearing. So if we could begin that, this is a Ethics Code Ordinance Amendment, and Susan Trammell, if you would join us and walk us through this thing, and then I'll open the public hearing.
Good afternoon, Chair Quincy and members of the committee. I'm Susan Trammell, the city's ethics officer, and I'm bringing forward to you today proposed amendments as recommended by the Ethical Practices Board in its 2014 annual report that was presented to you last fall. The majority of the ordinance changes are just updates and changes to comply with changes in state law. And for the most part, there's not much expansion of the ethics code. There are a few minor changes that do expand the code. For example, in section 15.40, conflicts of interest, it was changed to use the word household, which more reflects the idea that a person could have a financial interest not due to their spouse or domestic partner, but some other adult living in the house. And so that's a broader term that will now be used. It also complies with best practices as evidenced in, for example, cityethics.org, which has a model ethics code and that us ethics officers frequently consult with. We made changes to outside employment to fill a gap in which department heads are also required to fill out these forms, but the prior ordinances only had them approved by department heads. So now the department heads, if they have outside employment, would go to their appointing authority and bring their outside employment form there. We also exempted both election judges and stagehands from outside employment provisions due to the type of work that they do and the fact that they have probably many, at least one, if not more, other outside employments. We changed statement of economic interest only to comply with state law. We changed city property and resources and political activity sections to reflect that funds and resources are included as city property and that you may not use city facilities, property, funds, resources, personnel, the logo, the city seal, or any other city resource for political activity purposes. There were some changes made to the Ethical Practices Board such that we wanted to clarify that we have a number of citizens who serve on one board and they want to also serve on the Ethics Board. And this would allow them to do so upon resigning from the board they're currently serving on. Whereas city employees and elected officials would have a 5-year wait time before they could serve. In addition, they defined the word employee to not include an election judge for purposes of serving on the Ethical Practices Board. We were losing out on a number of very favorable candidates because of their service as an election judge for the city, and thus they were deemed to be an employee of the city. The sanctions section was amended to reflect compliance with both the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act and open meeting law. It did not explicitly state that before, and so there was some confusion about what was being reported out for complaints to the Ethics Board, and compliance was done such to not violate the state law, and that's now just reflected in the language of this section. And outside of that, we changed the definition of department head to be able to be usable should departments change and should department head titles change going forward. And that's pretty much all of the substantive changes that we've made to this code. Are there any questions for me?
Are there any questions for staff on this item? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Ms. Trammell. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Ethics Practice Board for their work in putting this together and bringing these ideas forward.
I'll share that with them.
Thank you. As this is a public hearing, I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone to speak on this item? Anyone? Anyone? Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing and move approval of the amendments to the Ethical Practices Ordinance. Any further comments, questions from council members? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? That item carries. Thank you very much. And before we take up the balance of the printed agenda, I wondered if we could hear from Ms. Siegel, who is bringing forward a request for council action here. This is accepting a contribution from the Vikings to the city for the downtown East Commons. So, Ms. Siegel, if you could walk us through this item.
Mr. Chair, Susan Siegel, the Minneapolis City Attorney, and thank you for being willing to consider this item on today's agenda. The Vikings are contributing an additional $2 million to improvements at the Commons, which is that 1 2/3 blocks that's part of this downtown east development. And we'd like permission of the council for the city to accept that gift and to authorize staff to enter into an amended charitable pledge agreement with the Vikings is the item.
Good. Thank you very much. Councilmember Glidden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question on whether this pledge of financial support is conditioned on any particular things being the case before money is released, or any other design wishes or whatever that may be of the Vikings in regards to the Commons.
Chairman Quincy and Councilmember Glidden, good question. When the Vikings contributed this initial $1 million, that the city entered into the original charitable pledge agreement back in 2014. There was an obligation, which is set out in a lot of other agreements, the downtown east development agreements, to complete what's called the basic park. And so that won't change. That will remain in this charitable pledge agreement, but there are no obligations beyond just delivery of the 1 2/3 blocks that Ryan Construction is already obligated to provide. It does not obligate the city to include any additional enhancements. If nothing further is done to the Commons beyond the basic park, I suppose the Vikings may ask for their money back. But there's no obligation on the part of the city to do anything additional beyond what we're already, what was already contemplated back in 2014, which was the basic park.
Okay.
And this is additional funds above and beyond anything, what's already been authorized in terms of work, and there were a few enhancements, underground enhancements that the council already authorized. Funds for that, this is above and beyond any of the funds that the city already has available through the Green Minneapolis fundraising for that purpose.
Okay. Thank you. Let's talk about Green Minneapolis for just a moment here. What's the difference, Ms. Siegel, between accepting a gift to the city versus Green Minneapolis as an entity? Why is it coming to the city first, or how?
It was a request of the Vikings that the funds come directly to the city, since they already had this charitable pledge agreement for this first $1 million. And that came in well before Green Minneapolis was formed. So I think it's to conform largely to an agreement that they already had.
That, I just wanted that clarified for everybody out there. This is not the Vikings giving us $2 million, but this is something for this intended purpose. And then the other question is why is it coming up now? Why is this a time-sensitive issue? I just want to make sure we're all understanding why it's coming to us today.
The Vikings have agreed that half of this, $1 million, will be paid to the city by January 15th. And since that was already an item that they had agreed to, and since we need to, if additional enhancements are to be accomplished to the park, which I think is everybody's desire, timing is of the essence. So that's the reason why.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Bender has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Siegel, I'm noting that 17 to 23% of the donation is to be reserved for operating expenses. And so I'm imagining that that would be to sort of put together a fund that would be the initial operating expenses. But we know that this will likely be a very expensive ongoing operations commitment. And so I just want to make sure this doesn't preclude any future discussions about how we might raise the funds that we need for operating. I remain concerned that we not commit $1 million in public dollars, for example, annually to operate this space, and so, or more. So can you talk about how the operating expenses was part of this discussion, and then how that number is kind of a specific number? So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair Quincy and Councilmember Bender, an excellent question, and one that we are working hard to solve. Green Minneapolis, in their fundraising for the Commons, in their pledge agreements, they have designated that they've allowed a range of 17 to 23% of all contributions that they get for the Commons will be set aside to fund operating expenses. So this is to make this consistent with that, to make sure that there is money set aside from private sources to help fund the operations. So it's a good thing to help figure this out.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from council members? Not seeing any. I'll move approval of this item as presented by staff today. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, and that item carries. Thank you very much. Now we have the balance of the agenda before us here. The first item is a settlement with a lawsuit with Chi Tao that's from the city attorney's office. The convention center brings forward a contract amendment with Messenger Construction for a contract closeout on convention center railing enhancement project. Finance and Property Services brings forward an item number 4 on your agenda. That's the rebid acceptance for Hiawatha HVAC equipment installation. 5 is a bid acceptance for Fire Station number 14 HVAC equipment replacement project. And number 6 is the architectural and engineering design services for 27th Avenue Northeast Storage and Maintenance Facility project. Human Resources Department brings forward item number 7. It's the Minneapolis Defined Contribution Retirement Plan. Information Technology Department brings forward 3 items. The first is a contract termination with Ardent Technologies for the solid waste information systems support and maintenance. Item 9 is a gift acceptance for IT for a February 2016 conference registration. Item number 10 is the contract for SecuroNet LLC for surveillance network services. Community Planning and Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee brings forward a number of items from their last cycle. This is the Lake and Nicollet Redevelopment Plan. Item number 11. Item number 12 is the 2nd Avenue North Van White Memorial Boulevard Redevelopment Plan. 13 is an emergency and non-emergency boarding contract amendment with Castorjohn, Inc. Health, Environment, Community Engagement Committee brings forward an item, a number of items here related to Food and Drug Administration Regulatory Standards Program. This is accepting several grants from USDA. Also, the Lead and Healthy Homes Outreach. This is a contract extension with ClearCore USA. Cost share funding agreements. This delegates authority to the Commissioner of Health to enter into cost share funding agreements for Green Business Cost Sharing Program. The Healthy Living Program, this is a consulting services agreement, authorizes an agreement with Ellingson Health Consulting. The Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee brings forward the Community Engagement Coordinator grant acceptance from the Joyce Foundation. Also, the 2016 National Forensic Sciences Improvement Grant acceptance from Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Item number 20 is the Police Bike Cops for Kids program. This is a grant awards from Cerisi Conlon LLP and Edward Phillips Family Foundation for a amazing, cool looking bike cops for kids van purchase. The Adult DWI Court grant acceptance for the 4th Judicial Court in Hennepin County. That corrects City Council action of last year, reflect a grant award in the correct amount. The Forensic Interview Services Contract Amendment with Corner House Interagency Child Abuse Evaluation and Training Center. Item number 23 is the Bomb Disposal Unit Joint Powers Revenue Agreement with the State of Minnesota Homeland Security. The Transportation and Public Works Committee brings forward a number of items. Number 24 is the Storm Pump Station Rehab and Upgrade Project. The East Downtown Pedestrian Realm Improvements. This is the Block 75 agreement. Item number 26 is the Waste Disposal Services, the contract with Hennepin County. 27 is the Nicollet Central Modern Streetcar Project. This is the master funding agreement. Item number 28, the Burnham Bridge over the Cedar Lake Channel Project. Item number 29 is IPS contract amendment for single space parking meters. Item 30 is the bid for construction for concrete sidewalks, curb and gutter, alleys and drive approaches. This is a low bid with Concrete Idea. Item 31 is the accepting the low bid with Landmark Structures for Fridley Filter Backwash Supply Tank Project. Then item 32 is accepting the single bid for Dresser Trap Rock for the bid on the rip wrap materials. That's really fun to say. And the final item is the bid for Washington Marquette Sanitary Sewer Rehab Project. Any questions or comments on those items? I'll move those items. Not seeing any. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And that those items are moved forward. So thank you very much. Seeing no further business, we're adjourned.